Attention, attention! Who do you think is smarter, an elephant or an ant? Most likely you'll think that an ant, it's probably a trick question, right?
But I'm stronger.
Oh yes, I am very strong. My muscles are getting beat.
Yes, in the wild, you don't have to be smart to survive. But in the animal world, power is so boring, there's not even much to show. Better yet, let's take a look together at those who we can calmly call super geniuses. Let's go. It seems that of all the animals alive today, only birds are able to imitate human speech.
I'm Disco and I know it.
Are you not a crook? My name's Disco.
Some other primates seem to understand it, but are unable to speak themselves. But there are dolphins. They're very social animals with a high level of intelligence, so why not learn to speak? 1, 2, 3.
He would work on the
When researchers noticed that dolphins mimic the tone of human conversation, they suggested that animals could not only understand our speech, but also mimic it through their breathing holes in the 60s. Margaret Ho spent several months trying to train Peter the dolphin to say certain words.
A-E-I-O.
And he was even able to do something. Some of the squeaks did sound like normal human speech, though you can't understand it without subtitles. Perhaps if Margaret had more time, the experiments would have ended more successfully. But Peter fell in love with his teacher, and soon, NASA stopped funding the research. The story of teaching dolphins to speak English ended before it even begun.
You can do better, Peter.
Naturalist and writer Joe Hotto was luckier, probably because he didn't try to teach human speech to anyone. Instead, Joe mastered the language of turkeys himself and boasted,
Bullshit.
no kidding. He raised a brood of wild turkeys, which thought the man was their father or mother. And really, the important thing is that they followed Joe everywhere, and he learned the language and even began to speak it. Well, of course, turkeys don't have specific sounds for words, but these birds were still pretty smart, or at least smarter than they seem at first glance. But to be honest, I don't really believe it.
You don't believe in anything.
Yes, I do.
There's no question, though, about the intelligence of elephants. Some experiments even show that it corresponds to the level of a 7-year-old child. No wonder elephants can draw. And they invented sunscreen. Yep, it looks like sand. Not that they did much scientific research, of course, but here's an interesting fact. Elephants have very sensitive skin. Yes, animals commonly thought of as thick skin are actually very sensitive, literally. What's more, their skin is incredibly vulnerable. Elephants can actually get sunburned. To avoid this, the animals wipe themselves with mud and throw sand on themselves and try to stay in the shade during the hottest hours. And here's another fact. Elephants know what altruism is. They sometimes help other animals and people too. So if you get too close to an elephant and you don't have any sunscreen, it'll gladly share some of its own. That's alright. But what if some other surprise comes along with the sand and meets a venomous recluse spider? One that doesn't like to weave webs, but just loves sand. When Zacharias is burying itself in it, it looks like the spider is totally excited about what's going on. Oh yeah. But actually, Zacharias needs sand to hunt. When it buries itself properly, the spider becomes practically invisible to its victims and can spend a very long time in an ambush. And I mean really long. These creatures can do without water and food for almost a whole year, so they don't rush anywhere at all. Perhaps that's why the lifespan of a sand spider sometimes reaches 15 years, while most other spiders barely manage to celebrate their 3rd birthday. However, the oldest known spider belonged to a different species. The spider, called number 16, was a Gaius villicis and lived in an Australian reserve from 1974 to 2016. That's 43 years. All that time, she's been watched by Iraqi biologists, people who study spiders and for some reason enjoy it. So anyway, for 4 decades, people have watched the life of number 16, and all that time the spider spent in the same hole. Now that's what I call self-isolation. Chances are, old lady spider would have managed to live many more years if her burrow hadn't been attacked one day by a spider wasp. Sheesh, the ruthless food chain. Many people felt sorry for number 16, so many that there were articles about her in major publications. But that's the way nature works. The strongest, fastest, luckiest individual survives. Well, and in the case of the hermit crabs, also the one who knows how to adapt.
Guys, there's a hermit crab using a shot glass as a shell. That's crazy.
And as I said in an earlier video, the life of these crabs is directly dependent on their shell. You have to get one of a bigger size over time, and demand far exceeds supply. So some hermit crabs use human garbage for shelter, and it looks honestly pretty sad.
I've never seen that. Look at it.
There's a chance there's a crab who's been carrying around some bean can would find it suitable. But on the other hand, if humanity produces so much extra stuff, why not create something for the poor crabs? A Tokyo artist in Omata printed transparent plastic shells, decorated with silhouettes of cities, and put hermit crabs into them. And while the crabs hardly appreciated the artistic element, they were certainly glad they no longer had to deal with the apartment issue. But people's desire to do something useful doesn't always end up really well. In the 1990s, the US federal government decided that it needed to restore the wolf population in Yellowstone National Park, and that was a huge mistake. While there were only 66 wolves in 1995, by 2002 there were 600. And then the predators moved outside the park and started hunting cattle.
$60,000 the first couple years. Between the sheep we lost, the calves we lost.
But I don't think that wolf hunting is always brutal carnage. No, they are incredibly smart, and they chose a different strategy for each situation. How do you take the meat away from a group of bears? It's enough to identify the youngest and pretend that you're going to attack. The adults won't be able to ignore its cry for help and will rush to the rescue and the meat. That's right, the meat will be unattended for a few seconds, just enough to have a light snack. Of course, you can hardly find bears on farms that are attacked by wolves, but there are plenty of smart guys out there to see that donkey. It may not be able to fight off wolves, but it can certainly compete with them in intelligence, or at least show them where the food is kept.
After opening the door, opening the food container is child's play.
Let's not embarrass this resourceful fellow. Better yet, let's go back to 2017 when Hurricane Harvey caused catastrophic flooding. The economic damage was enormous, but while people were trying to save pets, one species successfully managed its own rescue. Yep, stinging ants. Like the vast majority of other ants, this species isn't adapted to swimming, and although the insects are very light, they can still drown, but only if separated from each other.
Can't swim! Stop!
In case of flooding, or just falling into the water, the ants cling to each other and form a sort of raft. Yup, that strange brown pile is made up entirely of ants, and believe me, you don't want to touch it. A single raft can include up to 100,000 individuals, and each one bites so painfully, it feels like it's burning with fire. So you don't want to help ants. When it rains, they'll figure it out on their own, as well as many other wildlife species. Unless it's some kind of natural disaster, they know how to adapt. Orangutans, for example, can't stand the rain, so they've learned to make something like umbrellas or hats out of leaves. This, by the way, is a unique behavior. Usually, animals just look for some sort of canopy when it rains, but orangutans are smart enough to make one on their own. Or they're just too lazy to find shelter? After all, although orangutans aren't humanoid apes, they're still very much like humans. Imagine being caught in the rain, and as luck would have it, you didn't bring an umbrella. No large leaves at hand either. What to do in such a situation? Well, like orangutans, use the means at hand. In zoos, there's no way to make a stylish hat, so primates have to think of something, and we must say they do a pretty good job.
Genius, genius, genius!
But there's more interesting things going on in zoos, or at least stranger things. I thought that was a fake news story, but no. People had to hide a group of gray parrots in a Lincolnshire zoo from visitors because of the birds' love for obscene language. Seriously, it's unclear who taught the parrots to swear. They came into the zoo already with this strange knowledge and really cheered up the staff. People began to laugh when they heard swearing, and this only encouraged the parrots to swear further. And the more they swore, the more often they heard laughter. But for some reason, the birds liked it very much. But when the staff tried to stop what was going on, the parrots learned to do that without people, one parrot cursing the other. And then they would just repeat it. When 20 minutes later, the birds swore at the visitors in public, the staff had to hide the parrots away, and they couldn't explain to them words they should and shouldn't use. In the end, the staff decided to put the parrots in different areas of the zoo so that they at least wouldn't shout foul words together. But there's always a risk that other birds will learn bad things from them. 250 birds swearing and laughing at each other all the time. I mean, that's crazy. I'd like to see that. See you later.